Ukrainians are suffering. 1 million refugees have been forced to leave their homes. Millions of human beings are crying out for hygiene products, food and blankets. You can help. I am proud to announce the launch of our Writers for Ukraine initiative, the 1 million word challenge. We are calling on all writers to take up arms and heed our biggest ever challenge to raise money for basic support in these unprecedented times. From Wednesday the 9th to Tuesday the 15th of March, writers from across the world will be banding together to achieve a combined word count of 1 million words. Pick up your pens, flex those fingers, donate to the cause, and write the words that will literally change the world. Writers for Ukraine. The world needs your words. Find out more at activatedauthors.com/Ukraine.
Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Wilcox. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behaviour. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators? Welcome to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the incredible Katlyn Duncan. Katlyn is a hybrid author of adult and young adult books and has ghostwritten over 40 novels. When she's not writing, she's obsessing over many television series and hanging out on YouTube, where she shares her writing process and all the bookish things. Katlyn recently published her debut non-fiction book for writers, Take Back Your Book, an author's guide to rights reversion and publishing on your terms. Katlyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. I am excited, and I think we should probably put a disclaimer that we know each other. You know, I'd like to consider us friends. That might be a bit forward to say on the podcast. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun conversation because I mean, we talk about a lot of, you know, writing things, about the bookish things all the time. But it's rare that we have to kind of like concentrate time, just me and you, in which I basically get to control the narrative of the conversation. So I hope you're ready for that.
I'm ready. I'm a little scared, but go ahead.
Oh, you don't need to be scared. But I did want to start because the last few mornings, one of the big features of my morning when I'm having my coffee and stuff, I've been watching your Vlogmas vlogs on your YouTube channel. What was the incentive for doing the Vlogmas? Because it seems like quite a big chunk of work to be doing each day to actually, like, you know, film the vlog, put the vlog together, and then edit it and then put it out the next day or the day after. What was it that made you go, I'm gonna do this for this Christmas?
I've been watching Vlogmas for creators that I watch for years. And I started my YouTube channel in 2019 and I was like, oh, let's do it. And then I would do some research, and a lot of creators say how difficult it is. Like, it tends to look very flawless and it tends to look like very fun, but it's a lot of work, especially if you're sort of doing that traditional Vlogmas where you record on December 1st and December 2nd, you have it uploaded. So it's like you have to figure out your day, and there's a lot of planning involved. And it's sort of evolved throughout the years where like people will make content ahead of time and then schedule for December. And I sort of started at that point because I'm a mom and I have a full-time job and I have an author career on top of YouTube and everything. So I just thought it would be fun this year, and I don't really know why I did it still, like, because it is very difficult. I eventually caught up with myself because I got my booster COVID shot and I was laid out for about 2.5 days. So I got really behind on it. So I cut out weekends, and I don't know, it's just a lot of fun, like, to have the final product, but it's definitely a lot of work. And my initial motivation for it was mostly I was looking at some metrics in terms of that, and they do say it helps with like watch time and things like that. So it was more of an experiment for me on my analytics, but it's a lot of fun. I don't know if I would do it again though, but I will like finish this year.
Yeah. So. And you seem to be really, from what I've seen of you, you're very, very just sharp on trying and experimenting and doing new things. So it's like, as a viewer, I like watching your YouTube channel, just seeing some of the stuff you do, because it's very, it's just interesting, and seeing behind the curtain of, you know, what it's like to just sit down and write and work and all the different parts, like you say, juggling like a full-time job and the mumhood and everything else is just, it's fun to watch, especially, I don't know if that gives any validity to it from my side, but I really, very much enjoy watching them.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. Why don't you give the audience a little overview of your writing journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was one of those kids who enjoyed stories, and I was really interested in movies and the behind the scenes. And I would, I'm going to show my age here, but like we had to like download and print off like scripts and stuff. And it was like all PDFs off the internet at the time, whatever that looked like. So a lot of it was just me like exploring story and structure. And I used to like take part in plays and everything. So that was like really my introduction to story. And then sort of at the time, it seemed like you had to be an author and you couldn't be anything else. And I was very much encouraged as a child to like do what I wanted to do, but like also make sure I had a full-time paycheck when I got older. So I sort of veered away from that, and I kept my love for movies and the behind the scenes and everything. And then in about, I think it was 2009, when like Twitter was gaining popularity, I saw a lot of authors who I admired like talk about their full-time jobs that wasn't authoring. So I was like, you can do both. So it like sort of like reignited my passion for story and everything, because I always like wanted to express myself in that sense. So a story came to me. That's my debut story, Soul Taken, which was reverted back to me. And I guess we could probably go into that a little bit too. Mm-hmm. So that story came to me, and then I found out about NaNoWriMo. So actually every year since then, I participated in NaNoWriMo, and I just only wrote the book in November because I did have a full-time job at the time. And then I started to get really serious and started querying, and I just sort of wrote the same story over and over, just trying to like figure it out and get the best product I could. And then I ended up selling it to Carina UK at the time. They were a part of Harlequin. It was a digital first imprint. I sold my book as a trilogy. So from then on, I published 13 books with them. They eventually turned into HQ Digital when HarperCollins purchased Harlequin. And sort of in between there, I had my child, and I started to get like, thankfully I was home. I'm very like, appreciative of that, but I started to get a little bored when I was like, baby was little, and I started ghostwriting at that time. So I was sort of double dipping and exploring my writing through ghostwriting. And I found it very much so freeing. I sort of figured out, the nuances of different genres, because I wrote middle grade, young adult and adult novels. So I've had the bug, I guess, since like 2009. And then I just really haven't stopped. And then this year was my first year delving into self-publishing and nonfiction.
There are so many directions that we can go. It's dizzying my brain. Like I guess one of the places I want to start is, we've already highlighted the fact that you've got a lot going on. You've got the YouTube, you've got your own work, you've got mom, you've got the full-time job. Obviously when baby was little, you were doing ghostwriting and things as well. Obviously there's a very, innate burning desire there to write and to create. But how do you balance it all? How do you keep productive in all these areas and try and keep all those plates spinning?
Well, I have no problem with being productive, because there's always a million things to do, especially because, as you've seen, I have like just a love for story in general, which I can go off in many different directions with that. Just in terms of balance, it's an evolving process, especially as having a child, go through different times of their life, seasons. I'm a little more adaptable now than I used to be with my schedule. So I sort of just have to go on that path. So I make sure that the thing that pays the bills, my full-time job, that takes precedence, and so does my family. And then I sort of fit things, in between. Writing to me is the most important thing. So I sometimes will put YouTube aside when I have to, usually when I'm on a deadline for a book. So it's just a balance. I create a lot of, at least throughout the past couple of years, I've created a lot of systems to make things move faster. I have like a system for my YouTube channel from inception of the idea to final upload. So I make sure I don't miss anything when I am busy, and that really just helps me, get through the process. So I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, I love the fact that you say it is an evolving process, because it really isn't. Like, one thing that I really lament at the minute is that my son has his bedtime's been pushed back just because he wasn't going to sleep at the hours, and he's getting older. And like, as lovely as that is to have more time with a kid, there's also a very small window in the day in which you have to yourself, because obviously the kids go to sleep, and I've just lost a big chunk of that, which is, swings and roundabouts. So you said, obviously, writing is the priority. It's the thing that comes first at all times. Has it always been that way, or are there points in which other stuff, because I know that for me personally, that I know that is the message that goes to my brain, but sometimes I will just forget that and be concentrating on other things, and then it's a few weeks have passed and I'll go, oh shit, no, I should be focusing on the writing. Is that something that you're very good at keeping in place, or does that sort of drift as well for you?
That's the problem for me half the time, is that I'll put books first, like the creation of books, but not necessarily like the things I should be doing. So I have like the opposite problem where instead of doing all of the admin and doing the things I should be doing, the research and stuff, I'm so focused on the book, and then I finish the book and I'm exhausted, and then I'm like, oh, I have this whole stack of things I need to be doing. So for me, I have like instated admin days for myself to do all of those other things. And it also gives me a little bit of a break when it comes to the creativity. But as I'm in different parts of the process, if I'm drafting or editing, like that usually just takes precedence for me.
And what does your morning routine typically look like? You say you do most of it in the morning.
Yes. So I try to do all of my author things between 5 and 7 in the morning. I found that is my most creative time. So that is a struggle to do. I don't want to do too much admin in the morning. Usually I would reserve that for after bedtime for kiddo. And the morning is just like my most creative time. So, I lose a little bit of sleep. I don't get as much as I have to or need to, but it works for me. And a previous job that I had to be at work at 6 o'clock. So like it's ingrained in me to get up that early. I know it scares a lot of people.
Like you say as well, when you have the boundaries of obviously having a child that goes on a certain schedule, like it definitely helps to push you. I was talking to someone earlier, and I was a very, very sort of similar conversation with sort of boundaries and reasons. And I am a little bit sad that this is gone, but at the same time, I'm not, for many reasons. But in my previous relationship, I used to get up early, and all it would take is one alarm and I'd be up, because I'd be so worried about like disturbing my ex. And, you get up because you don't want to keep pressing snooze, and then it affects someone else. So you just get up and do the thing. But yeah, just being very, very strict on that. So between 5 and 7, your most creative times. What does that 5 to 7 look like? Is it a case of waking up and going straight to the keyboard? Do you give yourself sort of like a little time first? Is there any like journaling or coffee, or what does that kind of look like to get to the keyboard and make that happen?
I mean, I'm an up and go because I do have that short amount of time. I go downstairs, I feed the cat. I have a rescue cat, and the previous owners, they have passed, unfortunately, but they were apparently up at 4 a.m. feeding the cat. So she's ready to go at 4. So I feed the cat and I get my coffee, and I'm straight up, in my office. And I do, as we take part in sprints sometimes. And I have another author friend that I do sprints with. I find that I don't necessarily need motivation or accountability, but I find it very much so helps. The mornings that I don't get to do sprints with others, I find that I'm not as focused. I can be, but I try to get to the keyboard as soon as possible, jump on sprints. I have playlists for all of my books, so that tries to get me in the mood straight away, because otherwise I would miss out on that time. And I never really plan on doing anything at night, just because I'm exhausted half the time. So I really, really have to focus in those 2 hours.
Are there mornings where you struggle to get to the keyboard? And if so, how do you overcome that?
There are times that I'll, hit the snooze and go on like my phone or whatever. But most of the time I do get up. I think for me, I found that once I put my phone further, that's my alarm clock, further away from my bed, the better, because it's a fact of when it was right next to my bed, you could just scoot it over and look at it. And now I have to actually get up. So like me going back to bed, doesn't really happen as often anymore, because it's like, you're
up anyway.
Like,
yeah,
you're gonna lay back down, and then I know I would definitely fall asleep if I laid back down. So
yeah, I've got so I've done the same, where I fell into an awful pattern, especially sort of towards the last few weeks living with my parents before I moved into this place, where my phone just went to on the bedside table next to me. And I've very deliberately set it up so that my phone is on a charging stand way away from my bed, and then next to that I've got a little like sunrise alarm clock that you set the time that the alarm goes off, and a half an hour before that it slowly starts getting lighter, so it emulates
I've heard of those.
Yeah, it's fantastic, because it's meant to emulate the sunrise and work with your circadian rhythm, so that before you've even woken up, your body started to react. And I will say I definitely can feel the difference from the mornings where I'm woken up by lights versus when it's pitch black and my alarm goes off.
Yeah,
makes a big difference.
This time of year, at least over here, is very difficult. It's very dark until about 6:37.
Yeah, because you're on the same, I want to say, latitudinal line, pretty much as the UK. So it should, I think it's around the same, almost like likewise, which is no fun. Having watched your YouTube, as now I make no secret of, you mentioned a lot of bookish things. For those who don't know, what are bookish things?
That phrase for me is a bit of a catch-all. So I say in my intro, we talk about the writing process and all the bookish things. So that sort of gives me a little bit of freedom with my content to talk about publishing, to talk about writing craft, business with being an author. I do a bi-weekly chat with two of my good friends. It's called the Writer's Hive. And we just basically pick topics, some topical, some, depending on the time of year, or just things that we think of about the writing process. And we just have a chat about it. So it's my little catch-all, which I enjoy.
Yeah, no, I love that. And is there sort of a structure to I know you obviously mentioned sort of the broad spectrum of bookish things, but do you have in your head a structure of what you do with your YouTube, or is it a case of, almost like with the Vlogmas, there's almost like seasons of content that come out to help writers at certain points?
Yeah, I would say sometimes. So like I'll try to do some inspirational, like nano-ish content during NaNoWriMo, or near any of the camps. But mostly I just sort of go by what I'm thinking at the time. I like to be as transparent as I can be with like specific projects that I'm doing. So I did a video all about how much it costs to, to publish a book and things like that. But I try to just go where the inspiration is, because I do find this process of doing YouTube, like I like to come up with an idea and I like to sort of storytell through it when I can. So I'll write about it. I'll write a script in a sense, and I'll sort of explore a topic. And then it's a fun hobby for me to do YouTube, even though it's sort of author related. But I really enjoy like that structure of it. So I try not to limit myself too much to specific things, and I don't like to repeat myself. So yeah, I just kind of go where I'm inspired.
And what would you say to authors that are interested in taking up the YouTube mantle and getting involved and recording themselves? Because I know that one of the main arguments that comes out of people who are thinking about it is that fear of putting themselves on camera and how they'll look. Like, how was that journey for you when you started YouTubing?
I think it's a valid concern that a lot of people go through. I went through it. It was more for me because I like to do a lot of research before I do things, just because I want to make sure I'm doing it quote unquote right. But when it comes to YouTube, and you'll hear this from many creators who've been on the platform for a while, like their early stuff where they are now looks very amateurish, but at the time it's like the best they can do. They're still exploring like cameras and angles and how they speak. Like I've learned so much about how I speak and things that I do, and like clicks and and everything like that through my YouTube. And I found that it certainly helped a lot with, doing live videos and live podcasts such as this. And it's definitely given me confidence. So I would say if you have any inclination of doing it, turn on a camera, turn on, a webcam or a camera or a phone, and just do it. You don't have to publish it if you're not, happy with it, but I think it definitely has benefits, and it can certainly help you as a person explore yourself. And, you know, if you do choose to do more author tube stuff, explore your process a little bit. And it's a fantastic community. We do a lot of events throughout the year, so it's fun.
Yeah, because you are very networked, it seems, with a lot of other YouTubers and author tubers.
Yes.
How did you grow that network? And sort of, do you actively reach out to people, or is it a case of, you know, they get in contact with you?
It's usually reaching out at first. YouTube is a funny sort of platform where it's just like all sort of comment based. And you sort of have to go off if you want to have like a private conversation, or you can, you know, you can email the person, or you can go on Instagram or anything like that. So it's more of just reaching out. And I found that a lot of like author tube groups sort of come from when you start. So usually we have what's called like the author tube newbie tag, and you can follow that tag on YouTube. So it's people who are new, and you sort of start from there. Yeah, so it's more about reaching out. So while you're sort of discovering yourself, you really have to come out of your shell a little bit if you're interested in more of that community aspect.
Yeah, so you have to be very, very, well, not very, very, but you have to be somewhat active in order to actually start generating that buzz and reaching people and getting involved.
Yeah, I mean, initially you can start off, you know, with your own community, such as family and friends and everything. But if you're interested in more authors, you kind of have to reach out a little bit. And I'm not saying at all that I'm an extrovert. I'm a very much an introvert. So it took a while for me to reach out and everything. But definitely, if that's an interest of yours, I'd say go for it.
And one thing I really like that you said there is the evolutionary journey of seeing where people have come from and where they are now. I know that one of the things I like doing, I don't know why I like doing it, it's somewhat a form of self-torture, somewhat nostalgia, but I like to go back to some of the first podcast episodes I recorded when I did the story studio with Luke Condor back in 2016, and just hearing yourself and hearing the evolution of, you know, your equipment, and like you say, the way that you talk, the inflections of your voice change and become like much more I guess emphatic.
Yeah.
As you get more down the line, you realize how monotone you are when you start. And I get a big buzz off of seeing someone do really well. So say like yourself, and looking back at like the earlier videos, which I have done, not to creep you out, and also with people like Jenna, where you look at like where she started versus where she is now, because I love seeing that journey. I think one of the things that really irks me is when people get to a certain point and they get rid of all that earlier stuff because it's not the quality of what they want now. I don't know about you, but I really like tracking that journey.
Yeah, you can private videos, and I know a lot of people do that. The only videos that I've sort of privated was I sort of was on the edge of like booktube content, where we talk about books, and author tube, where you more talk about writing. So I started like straddling that line, and I found that like I didn't get a ton of views on those. So, you know, sometimes you have to play with the algorithm. So you know, I privated those, but you know, when as much as I would love to private a lot of them, like unless I said something like totally wild, you know, I just leave it out there because for me, while they may be a little cringy, like I hope that, you know, maybe someone will stumble upon me and be like, oh, I feel, you know, I can connect with you and all that. And I'd hate to like lose that opportunity by privating something just because I'm embarrassed or whatever.
And it's different stages for people as well. So the stage that you were when you were making those earlier videos, someone might be coming into you at that point in which they're on that same level and might resonate more with that than they would with sort of the more polished, the more like trained Katlyn. I'm a big believer in the different levels of content and how people can get involved. We've mentioned that, well, you mentioned that obviously you got involved with traditional publishing and you've had quite a few books traditionally published, and you're now getting to the point where some of those rights are being reverted to you. Tell us a little bit about how your experience was with traditional publishing, because I mean, full transparency, the last few authors that have come on have been very, very stringently self-published, and I want to add a bit of balance to that if I can. So how was your experience with traditional been?
I mean, I'd say it's pretty positive overall. I mean, I don't know where I would be right now without traditional publishing like that. You know, in 2012, you know, even though people were doing really well self-publishing at the time, I just didn't feel comfortable or confident enough. And I think working with Karina and HQ Digital and the editors were so lovely, and it just really gave me a lot of confidence. And it was positive. I mean, there's pros and cons to a lot of different, you know, aspects of traditional and independent publishing, but once I sort of gained that confidence, there was a lot of things that like I just didn't like as much as I suppose I used to. There was sometimes lack of communication, and I go into it in some parts of my book. Like, I am in no way knocking traditional publishing at all, but there are just some things you sort of, you deal with, and, you have to see if that's something you're okay with dealing with. So there was at points lack of communication. I would send an email and they wouldn't get back to me for 2 months. And for someone, I didn't mention that I've never had an agent. And usually that's sort of your liaison at times. So that's something I had to deal with. There was quite a big turnover at some point with the editors. So you're sort of, and for any traditional authors, that's like so devastating to lose your agent, because this is the person who went to acquisitions for you. They want your book, they love your book, and then they leave. And it's like, okay, what happens? Like, you could get another stellar editor, or you could get someone that, like, your book was just thrown on their lap, basically. And I'm not saying, anything bad about that. It is what it is, but it's definitely taught me to have more confidence, and also sort of how to take control of my career. So when you sign traditional contracts, I mean, you have option clauses and you have reversion clauses and everything that you have to, abide by when you sign them. So as I didn't have an agent, I had 4 contracts total with them. And with each contract, I was like a little more like, I want this and I want that. And, will you be doing audiobooks, or can I keep, the rights to that, or things like that. And my last contract, I actually retained the film rights for my 2 women's fiction novels. So that was something that, one thing I do talk about a lot with Take Back Your Book is like your ability, like you have to have enough confidence to like say what you want and and be prepared to walk away. So I was prepared to walk away if I didn't get the film rights for those books, full transparency, because, and this is a pipe dream for a lot of authors, but like, I did write a Christmas novel, and, Hallmark and Lifetime and Netflix and all them, they're always looking for a sweet romance for the holiday season. So I was like, well, I think this book could do well eventually in that light. So I was like, I'm going to ask for the rights, and if I don't get them, then I may just move on with this book elsewhere. And they did give it to me. So yeah, I think I veered off from the original question.
No, it's perfect. And I mean, since you've kind of taken us into your book, Take Back Your Book, why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of where that idea came from and some of, what the book is about?
Yeah, absolutely. I can show it for the video viewers. So this sort of came out of a conversation with a friend of mine where I was talking to her and I was a little bit frustrated. So at this point, I had already had my debut trilogy. The reversion period was up. It wasn't selling to a certain threshold. So I asked for the rights back and they gave them back to me. So I was in the process of deciding the path for them. And I was talking to a friend about how frustrated I was with the lack of information out there about rights reversion. There are plenty of articles that are like, this is how you do it, but not many people tell you what to do after. And, you sort of take self-publishing, and there are so many things you can do with self-publishing. So for a traditional author who was like sort of told and like, brought along on this sort of treadmill of like publishing, like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was the right thing to do. So I was like, there's no guide out there for anyone. And as I was going through it, I was like, well, why don't I write one? Like at least sharing my process and like things that I considered. And sort of from that book, I sort of went through like a retrospective of what I've been through, and then also looked toward the future of all the possibilities for any book that is reverted. And it's sort of to help, authors like me who are sort of in that process of like, I don't know what to do at all. Okay, here's your guide. Here's all of the things you could do. Now you need to make your decisions based on that. So that was my hope, was to inspire others that like, they're not alone if their books aren't selling, because reversion sort of comes from like a quote unquote failure, like perspective. And it's sometimes, I've been through the gamut of emotions, embarrassing, you're like fearful if you're ever going to get another deal. And, you don't really want to talk about it, but there are so many authors that I did speak to that sort of just did all of this without saying anything, and they just like got their book back and then self-published it. But I find there's strength in community, especially in the publishing industry, where you know, a lot of these things in trad publishing are coming to light, where, you know, just a little bit at a time, we can sort of like inspire authors to have more control over their careers than some may be given in the trad space.
I think, yeah, a lot of it comes back to transparency is power. Like you mentioned right at the beginning of this interview, the fact that, you know, you didn't know that you could be an author and a full-time worker and a mum and all that kind of stuff all at the same time. And so many people who you think are one thing are actually not behind the scenes. And that's one of the things that I like about sort of just the transparency of what the internet and social media has given you. And particularly in this situation, the fact is that, you know, like you say, a lot of people pursue so hard to be able to sign that dotted line and to get their books into the hands of an agent, then a publisher, and to get it out there, that there are, you know, hundreds, if not, well, definitely thousands and thousands of people who have gotten to that point where, you know, the sales slow because the publishers aren't pushing them, or, you know, trends change and things. And I like the fact that, you know, you saw this gap where there was this lack of information, and so you use that to document your journey. And, you know, I was lucky enough to be one of the ARC readers of Take Back Your Book, and to like see the first instances of it. And even for people who aren't traditionally published, there's a lot of information there about just ways to leverage your book the best way. Like if you are looking at pursuing traditional, there's kind of like some stuff to be aware of to help you get the best out of that deal. Like you mentioned before, after a couple of different deals, you found more and more confidence to actually negotiate and ask for the things that you want. And I think a lot of people with that first contract especially are so scared of it flying away that they don't want to touch it or break it, or, you know, even try pushing themselves forward. But there is a lot of power in, you know, that knowledge, that sharing, that sort of bringing it to life. I do think that, you know, Take Back Your Book was a fantastic read for me, even as someone who hasn't gone into that traditional space.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear, because I think it changed a lot. You were one of the first. So it's changed so much, like, since you read it. And that was, you know, you guys helped me with the structure and everything. So I so appreciate the feedback and everything. I'm glad you got something out of it too.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. No, it's always an honor to read people's work before it actually comes out. But yeah, like I say, it's well worth checking out. I think there's a lot in there that people of all stages can take away from that. And the interesting thing with that book is that you self-published that. So that was, if I'm right, your first experience with self-publishing. What was that experience like for you?
It was a lot. And, you know, as I mentioned before, I try to do systems where I can. And I knew that I wanted to document how I self-publish, because that's sort of my intent moving forward. I mean, I will never say never to trad publishing again, but my intent moving forward is to self-publish. So it was quite a ride. It was so interesting to figure out, you know, even just like the book production side, like what pages need to be in there. Like with trad publishing, I basically just wrote like the meat of the book. I didn't have to worry about copyright or any like back matter or anything. So I did a lot of research. I took a lot of books and I used them as inspiration and what I wanted my book to look like. And then sort of on the publishing end, it was nuances of all of the vendors. I go direct to the vendors that I can go to direct. I don't use an aggregator for like, you know, Amazon or Apple Books or anything. Like I go direct, and then I use Drop to Digital. So I had to learn all of these new platforms and nuances. And I had to make sure, like, you know, the summary was perfect. So that took a lot. And, you know, just even like book sizes and book page, you know, the pages, like, you know, there's so many different options. And like, then I had to learn vellum as well, because I format my book. So it actually only took place over a couple of months. I think with this book, I wrote it so quickly because I was just bursting with getting this out and, you know, helping other authors when I could. So it was quite a process, and I made sure to document all of it to make sure that the next time it goes a little bit faster.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you can do, isn't it? Get that starting point and then growing it from there. And one thing as well that I don't think either of us mentioned was that you actually had other people give almost case studies as well for this, other people who have been through that experience. How did you go about reaching out to them and getting them involved? Because I can imagine that that would be quite tricky terrain to come over with some people.
Yes. I did come up with like really enthusiastic authors. So I sort of pooled my network first. So I knew straight away that two authors in my network definitely had their rights reverted. They're both in the book. And they were happy to give their case study. Other ones, I sort of had to reach out of my pool, out of my network a little bit to just, I am in a strengths forum. I don't know if you've talked about strengths at all, but Luke Clifton strengths and
Yeah, we got a
Becca
couple.
Syme and everything. And they have forums on there once you take their courses. So I asked people in my forums based on my strengths if anyone wanted to talk about it. There were some people who never got back to me. There were some people who were very wary of what I was doing with the information. And I also so I had them fill out a survey just to sort of have that structure of the interviews and how they went. And some people just wanted to give just the information, but didn't want to be credited in the book and everything. So it ran the gamut, and I was really happy with the people that I had. And in that vein, I was planning on just having, positive results of getting rights reverted. And then I'm in a group of authors in my imprint, and sometimes there are struggles with it. And every now and then reversion comes up because, it's an instance of my book isn't selling, they're not promoting, things like that. And I reached out to the group and I said, would anyone want to talk about like the negatives of rights reversion and how hard it can be sometimes to get your rights back? And I had a lovely author, Terry Nixon, talk about her process. And it was just, I think it added a little bit more to the book, because while I want to inspire people to take control, there are instances where you may feel even more discouraged because your book is not selling and you're not getting your rights back for many different reasons. So I loved that part of the process, and it really, I think, made the book a little better, where people may not see themselves in my story, but they may see themselves in someone else's story.
Yeah, it just makes it more robust. I did a similar thing with collaboration for authors, in which a author friend of mine very kindly donated an essay on a collaboration that went horribly wrong, and so that was in the appendix of that book, where people could obviously read the way to make things work and all the positives, and there was those case studies in there. But then I think adding that negative as well, it just makes it more realistic and gives people that almost cautionary tale of, even if you follow all these steps, the reality is that sometimes things don't go right. I can imagine that is a really frustrating part of the process once you've, signed the agreement and you get to that reversion period, and then you see that, a threshold isn't quite hitting, or it's just hitting to the point that you can't get your rights back. Have you had that frustration yourself with some of your books?
Oh yeah, like I have asked for book rights back, and the publisher would say, oh, we're going to get new covers, we're going to do this, we're going to promote it more. And you kind of just have to go with it. I mean, they do have, some language within contracts, and I'm not a lawyer, so don't take anything I say as legal advice, but that the publisher has the opportunity to sort of like do these things to help, bring new life to the book, and you just have to sort of go with it. And what I do recommend is that there are some checks and balances, like make sure that they're doing the things that they're going to do, and that you keep checking, depending on the contract, like every 6 months or so, to make sure to check your numbers and see if you're still in that threshold or not. And then just keep asking if that's your real intent. Like follow up is definitely key.
It's a tough game, and there are people out there who are and not slamming anyone particularly, but I know that I've certainly come across people who are in a position where they are almost taking advantage of authors who are a little less in the know of contracts. So before signing anything, certainly like check it out, look into it, make sure you understand each point, because that is the moment in which you can claim your strength for later on if things don't go well.
Yeah, and I would recommend, if you don't have an agent, because agents are, they negotiate contracts for authors, like you definitely look into hiring a literary lawyer, specifically someone who looks at these types of contracts. I mentioned in the book that I made the mistake of having just any lawyer look at my my first contract, and they're like, yeah, that's good, looks pretty boilerplate. But there's so many little nuances when I actually like reached out and hired someone. I believe that was for my third contract, And they were able to point out such little nuances that I didn't like, I sort of glossed over. If you've ever read a contract, you know, they can be pretty dry, and some of the language is not quite like how you would interpret things. So, you know, there's also organizations as well for authors that do have lawyers on staff, or they give advice. And I would go in that direction if you felt at all that you didn't understand every single piece of information in your contract. Like, it's so important that you understand it before you sign it.
Especially if it's for, you know, 7, 10, 15 years, however long it is. Like, that's a long period of time, and a lot can change in that time.
Sure. Yeah.
So you self-published Take Back Your Book. You've since self-published a fiction book as well. 2 fiction books, just 1 fiction book at this point?
Just 1 so far, yeah.
And you said, you know, after you self-published Take Back Your Book, that you started to build the system, and then, you know, you learned things to go into the second one. Was there anything that comes to the top of your mind that you can think of from that first book that you were very aware of going into publishing Soul Taken?
Suppose I ran into an issue sort of with the paperback at the time with Ingram Spark and everything. Like, that was something I should have known, but I didn't like sort of realize too. Like, so there was a big delay with the paperback, and I really wanted it out on you know, publication day. And so I knew with Ingram Spark, you can do the pre-order and everything, but I just like really did not feel comfortable like putting that book out until I held it and I could see it and everything. So that was something I became very much aware of after, you know, publishing Take Back Your Book, because I had a little bit more time to sort of go through and look at all the details of Take Back Your Book, since it was my first one. Yeah, so I suppose I had to be aware more about shipping times and creation times of the paperback, but everything else went pretty smooth. Once you sort of set up on all of these platforms, these vendors like Amazon and all that, like, it's pretty easy to upload books after that. But I struggled a bit with Take Back Your Book, setting up all of them. So I was very aware like how easy it would be after that to do all these books. And
you mentioned quite a few times throughout this interview about systems. Obviously, you're very methodical, it seems, when it comes to, you know, creating something that's replicable, something that you can grow and expand on, that helps you nail down things that you need to do, because, you know, with being so busy with so much stuff, you need a way to keep track. Do you have any advice for sort of particular tools or things that you use that you find useful when it comes to trying to arrange everything?
Oh, I know. That is also an evolving process for me. Like, I love organizational tools. Like, I use the brand new one every time they come out, just because I'm constantly looking for like to hone in as much as I can. Currently, for a majority of my YouTube content and for my book production, I use Notion. It's a free workspace that you can use, and you can make it
God space.
Yeah, it's when you're faced with a blank page on Notion, it's very overwhelming. But you can do so many different things, and it's definitely a good digital platform for anyone who's looking to sort of customize. I've tried Asana and Trello, and so you can sort of do some stuff like that in Notion, but I adore spreadsheets. So I love how I can do that in Notion. So I've used, prior to finding out about Notion, I had a lot of Excel spreadsheets. I find I track very easy that way. And when it comes to my to-do list, so a lot of my systems live on Notion, but when it comes to my to-do list and my daily productivity and everything like that, I tend to be very visual. I tried for a while to do on my iPad planning, but I don't know how, if it's how my brain works, but once that screen goes off, like, I just forget everything. So I've gone back to a notebook. So it's right here, it's in front of me always, so I know exactly what I'm doing. So I do have that visual element, but I think for me, setting up these systems in an easy way for me to access is absolutely key. And it always has to be front of mind. So when I open up my browser, Notion is right there at the top. So I can always just quickly access it.
And as you say, that's been a steadily evolving process for you, because I think one thing that I see a lot of people get almost overwhelmed at when they're trying to create some kind of system is that they see other people's where it's all comprehensive and everything's linked and everything else. And they forget that, you know, you just got to start in a place and then build from that as and when you need it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like start very, very, very much into like an easy process. Like for me, I started off at checklists with Notion, and you can easily make a ton of checklists, and then you can start going into the linking and everything. I am not like a Notion expert at all with databases or anything, but they are like, it can be so powerful. And for me, it is a process where I was telling you the other day about Notion, like for like 3 months, I was like so obsessive. I watched so many YouTube videos on Notion, and I'm still not like touching its ability. But I would definitely like try to learn the platform too as you go and make mistakes. And then, I would say just constantly try to evolve your process too until you've really honed it, and then just stick with it if you can.
Perfect. Well, we are narrowing down to time, so I'll ask you 1.5 more questions, and
sure.
then we'll round up. So my final big question is, Katlyn Duncan, why do you write?
Because I have to. It's just something in me. This is a really difficult career path, and I wonder at least once a week what my life would look like without it. And I can't see past that question. Because I can't not do it. I just have stories and love for stories in me that I can't do anything else.
It resonated real hard, because I've had that with like moments where you're just like, oh, wouldn't it be easier to not have this like just burning needs to constantly be creating something? Wouldn't life just be easier? And they're like, it'd probably be quite boring.
Yeah, you'd have time. Like, what is time? Like, you could watch TV, enjoy movies, have a hobby. But this is like a hobby and a career. It's so muddled.
Yeah. I love that. How can people follow you and find out more about yourself and all that you're working on?
Yeah, my main hub for all of my socials and everything is at my website, KatlynDuncan.com. That's KatlynDuncan.com. I'm mostly on YouTube and Instagram, and I have all that information on my website. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'll put all those links in the show notes. And Katlyn, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. And thanks to you, the listeners, for tuning in. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, then head on over to activatedauthors.com to find out about all that we do in our community, our resources, and everything else. And one thing that we didn't mention is you can also find Katlyn hanging out over on our Slack group and join her alongside our other expert panelists every single month for our live member Q&As. And I will see you next week. Ukrainians are suffering. 1 million refugees have been forced to leave their homes. Millions of human beings are crying out for hygiene products, food, and blankets. You can help. I am proud to announce the launch of our Writers for Ukraine initiative, the 1 million word challenge. We are calling on all writers to take up arms and heed our biggest ever challenge to raise money for basic support in these unprecedented times. From Wednesday the 9th to Tuesday the 15th of March, writers from across the world will be banding together to achieve a combined word count of 1 million words. Pick up your pens, flex those fingers, donate to the cause, and write the words that will literally change the world. Writers for Ukraine. The world needs your words. Find out more at activatedauthors.com/Ukraine.